We're in the second episode here of the ArcFlow podcast, where we kind of dive deep into manufacturers throughout the UK and the US who are making a difference, and also the ecosystems that support them. And today we're joined by Sam Baynham, who is the founder of ConeX, which is an ecosystem tool that is supporting SME manufacturers in the UK. So, Sam, just to start off with, why don't you tell us a little bit about ConeX and what motivated you to kind of embark on that journey?
Of course. Obviously, thanks for having me. So the idea behind ConeX was to build a bit of a safe space, if you like, so a place where SME manufacturers can genuinely connect with one another, help one another, and solve some of these big industry challenges that are out there. So that's been very much the first phase, if you like, is building the community element, positioning ourselves as this almost this voice for SMEs and seeing what we can do to support them internally. And then moving forward into this kind of secondary phase, if you like, it's very much now how we can leverage that skill set and support the group even further. So that's kind of what we're doing with ConeX, and it all came about from essentially a frustration. I was working very much in the design space before, helping individuals with their ideas, bringing them to market, getting them to that kind of prototype ready stage, and then always coming up across this brick wall of where do I go next, who do I talk to, where's that kind of trusted space to learn a bit more about manufacturing, and how can I get the right advice to move this product, this project forward. And there never seemed to be a defined answer of where to go or who to talk to. So that's partly one of the many reasons why we set up ConeX, is to potentially be that sounding board, that area where people can go and get the right advice and talk to the right people within the industry.
Okay. And I guess you kind of see like ConeX as being the 1 to 10 support, whereas 0 to 1 is probably more things like your grant situations out of the UK. So does ConeX kind of kick in once you're a little bit established and you're looking to grow out your network as an SME? Is that where you would see it being the best?
For our existing members, yes. So to become a member of ConeX, yes, I would agree with that. More established businesses, SMEs working together on projects, ready to win work, essentially. But from more of a 0 to 1 startup point of view, there is still value within the group, or within at least connecting with myself, so we can answer some of those early stage questions that you may have. We can put the odd question here and there into the kind of community, into the group to support those stages as well. Obviously, we can't provide any financial support and those sorts of things to get things moving. So yes, it needs to be partnered alongside something a bit more established from a financial perspective. But that initial sounding board is still there, and that does still work through the kind of ConeX group.
Okay. And I mean, you've been in the manufacturing world for a while. What are the most significant changes you're seeing in that SME sector, maybe over the last 5 years, that kind of are really coming to life?
Realization that we actually need to shout about what we do as SMEs, as manufacturers. I think it now, more important than ever, it is time to really start showing not just our industry but outside our industry how good the SMEs are in this country, and how innovative some of their ideas and their projects are, and how it can actually support the entire sector, the entire ecosystem, all the way through the supply chain. I think for too long they've just been sat almost in the background, just winning bits of work here and there, growing their business, but there hasn't been that much of a structure how some of that is fed down from the top down. So what we're especially trying to do with ConeX and with our group is be that voice, that almost that disruptive voice, to try and change the way things are done, and put the SMEs first, and get them really shouting about the genuinely great things that they all do are. It's hard, like definition of an SME as a small business. So a lot of these directors, these MDs, whoever it is within the business that's in charge of actually running and growing it, they're also getting hands-on in the tools and the projects and everything else that goes into running a business. So while it's probably on their list to shout about what it is they do, it's not necessarily high up the list because they've got jobs coming in they need to get out the door.
No, definitely.
So yeah, it's a massive challenge, but hopefully by building this kind of community as a whole together, this ecosystem, then we can start to take some of that weight off of them.
Yeah, I think manufacturers also kind of lag in a lot of ways. Most modern business had caught up to the phase where it realized that you need to publicize what you do, but manufacturers for so long operated in the background. They kind of just plugged away, they did good work, they never had websites, they never invested into SEO, and they were running their business as like a traditional business up until, the 2010s. Even 2019, I've seen businesses that don't have websites. And you start to think like, how are modern businesses meant to access you when you aren't at least advertising to some degree who you are and what you're doing? So yeah, manufacturers definitely don't seem to prioritize what a lot of businesses have for so long.
I agree. Everything is made, right? And there's no from a general public point of view, anyone that you talk to on the street, anyone that isn't involved in manufacturing doesn't seem to realize how important manufacturing is. And it's not until you start having that conversation saying, oh, this coffee cup that you're holding, or this table that we're sat on, or whatever it may be, has been made somewhere. There is a process that's gone into that, and why it is what it is, and why you're actually using this item, whatever it is. And people just don't realise how important this sector is. Take manufacturing away, we're going to be left with very little.
No, it's honestly incredible. We service manufacturers and distributors, and people don't realize that everything you touch, exactly what you're saying, is at some point in one of their hands. And it really is an interesting thing to think that there are so many of these manufacturers and distributors. It's in every single country. And they're actually just so pinnacle to the entire ecosystem of most of what goes on. And that consumerism as a whole is literally underpinned by what these people are making and what they're designing. So yeah.
And they're not at the forefront of people's minds, and they should be.
Exactly.
But once you get in that habit of thinking about everything that you do and everything that I don't know if I'd advise it, but it becomes almost addictive, thinking, oh, I wonder who made that. I wonder what process went into that. I wonder what material you used. I wonder why they designed it like that. And then it's suddenly this opening a box of all sorts of questions. But yeah, I mean, you touched on the younger generation thing a minute ago, and that I think that's going to be the best way to tap into that skill set, is by getting them to ask these sorts of questions so they learn about it and want to know more and get excited by these sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I come from an engineering background, and I feel like my first question is always, how does it work? Just simply because you do so much of that problem solving. And maybe a way to drive manufacturing towards the youth is to introduce some of those questions early on in the learning process, not at the university level, because it really does go amiss where a lot of youngsters don't ask the questions of why does something work the way it does. And if you just start to introduce those questions, people might pique an interest and say, maybe I am interested in the mechanics behind this. Maybe I am interested in going into the manufacturing side. I think you've also touched on a really interesting part of this is, why do you think that the youth is just completely missing the mark when it comes to manufacturing? Why do you think we're having this massive job gap of unfilled roles in the space?
It's awareness. It has to be. It has to come down to awareness. There is such a small pocket of educators, shall we say, that really understand manufacturing. When you find someone in the education space that understands engineering and manufacturing, all of their students get it, and all of their students are potentially positioned to go into that role because they understand it. Their process, their passion is manufacturing, and that naturally filters down to the students. But there are so many educators that don't know about it, and I think that's where the problem lies. They're obviously, yes, they've got to follow a curriculum, and I completely understand that, and they've got so many other sectors trying to get their attention, but I don't think at this moment in time the manufacturing sector quite realises that this in itself is a marketing challenge. Like, our competition is the other sectors that are also trying to tap into this younger generation, this skills gap, and some of them are doing it a lot better than others. The best example I've heard is when you're looking at your phone, all of the kids and everyone at the minute understands the software side of it, and they all want to develop apps and come up with ideas and create content and create videos, and they all want to do that element, but I bet they've never even thought about what the actual phone or the unit is that they're holding in their hands to be able to do all of this stuff. That's that kind of mindset shift that we need to somehow tap into.
Yeah, the industry almost needs to kind of get together and find a way to motivate youngsters the same way, the milk industry got together and did Got Milk as a campaign. Maybe manufacturing as a whole needs to come together and say, how do we actually drive an interest in the space? But if you were to look at it, let's say you were a manufacturer, how would you go about attracting youngsters? Because this is a question we get asked sometimes working on the tech side is a manufacturer will come to us and say, we're installing ERP software, we're moving towards AI. How do we further prepare ourselves to attract young talent? And it's an interesting kind of standpoint because you are also competing against other manufacturers when the pool is so small.
My advice would be to genuinely show up and offer time, and not even that much time. So we did an event at Silverstone UTC back in February, and we were talking about what they would need from manufacturers to help. Yeah, the UTCs are very well set up. It's all around the manufacturing and mechanical engineering and all that stuff anyway. That's the purpose of why they've been set up, is to try and help this process. But every single manufacturer has a local school or college, right? It's honestly as little as an hour every 2 or 3 months. Anyway, I know everyone's busy, but I guarantee anyone can find an hour somewhere to touch base with the school, go in and maybe host an assembly, bring a few students on a factory tour, so anything like that. Anyone can do it. And that is all it takes. If every manufacturing company was doing that engagement piece, the schools want it more, but they don't have the time or resource to go out and find it. If we were just to show up as an industry and say, look, we're here, what do you need? We're willing to talk to your students. Yes, we can't put a huge amount of time in, but we're willing to have that conversation. I think that alone would make a massive difference.
Definitely. And it's also a lot cheaper than the recruitment process anyway. So, I mean, for them to go and do that hour or two and get a couple of employees to go and talk to the school, at least then you show people there that there is an opportunity. There is, the first thing someone thinks of when they're looking for something new to do or a new role, that might come to mind, whereas they don't even know about you otherwise because of the way manufacturers kind of approach this recruitment sector.
Yeah, completely agree.
So, I mean, we're kind of talking a little bit about digital presence, and I went back and actually looked at the first ConeX website from 2020, and I'm sure a little image will come up with that now. And I can see there's been quite a significant change with the messaging, with a shift towards community. So over the last 5 years, how has it changed? I mean, what is your kind of perspective on how it's maybe grown into something different?
I launched ConeX in an interesting time. So it's effectively 2020, officially a bit more like 2022, 2023, really. But in that early stage, I was still like in employment. I was still doing other stuff at the same time. But in that early stage, it was during lockdowns. People wanted that companionship, almost that place to go where they could talk to other people, like-minded people, and that kind of drove that early stage ethos. It's that safe space, come and have a chat with a relatively small group of people at the time. And then that's naturally just kind of pivoted and moulded a little bit more nationally. Originally it was Cornwall, Devon based, and the more conversations I had with those outside of the region, realised that it's actually a national issue. So we've expanded now nationally, and just alongside that, it naturally developed into a slightly different piece of messaging. So it's much more around the community and much more around that ethos of helping each other out. From the outside looking in now, it's very much events-based networking community. Start the conversations. You never know where one conversation will lead you within that business. And we're actually about to slightly pivot again. We've almost laid the foundations of the community now. We've got a good group of members. We've got a really good, well tied in kind of core of people. And now the messaging again is very much going to shift again towards leveraging that skill set. And what we can do within this group now, and how we can position them in front of the right people, and as I said, be that kind of disruptive voice, that representation for SME manufacturers, and see what we can do with them moving forward.
Okay, and then the next 5 years, I mean, I can imagine with a community at the center over the next number of years, you probably want to build out almost like an ecosystem where you bolt on other offerings or services. I see a natural progression through like a jobs portal, for example. There are these nice little things that communities need access to, and if you have the community, you can start to build out the reciprocal services.
Exactly that. It's going to become much more partnership focused, maintaining the core ethos, maintaining that kind of support platform, but focus on those partnerships and how we can leverage that skill set and who we need to be working alongside to make sure the group are getting value out of being part of what we're offering. So yeah, there's a whole host of ideas around what we're going to be doing and how we're going to be adding value, which is ultimately what communities and what groups are about. It's that value add, and anyone who's part of any subscription or any membership group should be genuinely renewing the value add to that every time they pay. And I know it's very easy to get tied into all sorts of subscriptions and all sorts of unknown payments that you don't really think about because they're relatively low cost. But yeah, I'd recommend anyone who's part of any groups, any membership, anything, to really think, is this genuinely adding value? And I don't mind saying that. I advise our members to do the same.
Yeah.
Are we adding the right value? Why not? And what can we do about it?
Definitely. I mean, you guys have taken the really great startup approach that you starting to see more and more now, where if you build a community first, there's so many products that go on top of it. So it's kind of like the community can help guide that product development. And I think we see that a lot now with modern startups, even coming out of the UK and the US. People are looking to build out these communities. And then from the community, they say, okay, what does everyone want? And then it's really easy to know that you're building something that's going to get used. You're going to have a product market fit from the day one. And it kind of drives it in a streamlined fashion. If you could go back and meet the version of yourself that started ConeX, what are some of the suggestions that you would pass back? And what are the things you've learned along the way that would have, trimmed years or months off this trip?
It takes time, a lot of time, and a lot of effort and a lot of work to build something like this. And it's not necessarily easy. Take as much advice in as you possibly can, I would say, and genuinely ask for help in those early stages. And obviously that's now the ethos that we have in ConeX. If you're starting something or you're looking to pivot or changing your business direction, ask for help. Why go through the pain that others have been through when they're there to ultimately support? I mean, I was pretty good at asking questions and asking things, but I don't know if I necessarily did it enough. And there's definitely a few mistakes that I've made along this journey, pieces of software that we've used, working with certain bodies or whatever it may be, that have added additional work and additional time. And I still don't get it right, but it's one of those things. It's do your research, talk to the right people before you make those decisions, because it can take a lot of time to come back from some of these changes.
Definitely. I mean, I think we talk a lot about ignorance as one of the superpowers of a startup, because if you were aware of the journey you're about to take on, you probably would never even embark on it. But because you're ignorant to the fact, you don't realize how far this marathon is, so you just start running. And I get, there's like a double-sided sword here, double-edged sword, that on one side, you're ignorant, so you're willing to do it, but you still end up making a lot of mistakes. And I don't think there's a startup out there that hasn't gone blow to blow with the classic issues that each startup has.
Yeah, it's not easy. Hopefully the rewards are worth it. And you're already starting to see just those moments when we're at our events and you see members engaging and you see projects being passed between each other and you get the little messages here and there saying ConeX has helped me do this, or I've been put in touch with this because of this person. It's like, okay, all of the hard work and the graft that's going into it, still going into it every day, is genuinely worth it.
Definitely. I get that completely. It can take one email and it can turn around an entire week. And it really is like that. You can work 3 days and have the worst days ever. And then on the fourth day, you get an awesome email and it's kind of okay, cool. Reinvigorated, wind in the sails.
Exactly that. Yeah.
So this is obviously a hot topic at the moment. And as an AI-enabled software, I have to ask you, have you started to kind of embrace AI? And I know you guys are obviously content heavy to a large degree because you are a members body. Have you started to use AI in your daily workflows and use tools that are, or do you think that it's better to kind of stay away from that because the content becomes almost, non-authentic?
From a automation and workflow point of view, yes. We, again, happy to admit we haven't got it right yet. There are definitely processes that we go through manually, which 100% need to be optimized, and we need to use AI for some of these things, which we are working on at the moment. Yeah, so I use it on a daily basis for various tasks and various things, which is great. And I definitely see the benefit, and definitely seeing, I wouldn't say my time's easing because I'm using AI to free up my time, but then I'm using that time for something different. So it's not easing my time at all. I'm finding ways to fill that time. But yeah, it's meaning we can grow the business and there's more coming off the back of it. From a content piece, I'm not entirely sure yet how that's going to play out in terms of lots of AI generated posts on social media or AI generated videos and that sort of thing. I don't know how that's going to play out in terms of all of these social media algorithms that seem to change every 5 minutes, and how AI posts react to some of those things. But I think from an initial research piece and some of the tools used, if for like video, for example, some of the AI tools in there that doesn't replace the kind of authenticity of the conversation, but just helps you get it out there faster. I definitely see the benefits there.
Yeah, definitely. That's our big push is we see manufacturers almost scared of this new technology. So we're trying to implement it into the ERP to show them we're not trying to take away work. What we're trying to do is make you more efficient. You shouldn't be searching for information or doing repetitive tasks or just trying to find an individual invoice, whatever it might be. It's like we're just trying to empower you to do things more efficiently so you can focus on the things that matter. And I mean, there's also another hot topic at the moment, which is around the increase in defense spending, which the UK has been one of the dominant players in Europe that's seeing a little bit of this. And then Europe as a whole is obviously increasing its defense spend. What do you think in terms of manufacturers? Should they be looking at opportunities to almost tap into some of that new defense spend? We see it in some of like our packaging manufacturers, for example. They might see opportunities to start producing packaging for that specific industry. Do you think it's worth looking at pivoting into it, or what would be your approach if you were in maybe one of the fringe industries?
Worth pivoting into if you've got the resource to do it, because defence is not exactly the easiest thing to get into. It takes a lot of time, there's a lot of certifications required, there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes, and if you don't have the resource or the skill set or whatever it may be, and it puts you essentially 5 steps backwards just to get one defence contract in, how many other additional contracts could you have got in that time with something else? So it's just a carefully managed business decision. If it is a case of running both side by side and you've still got the growth within whatever other sectors you're using, then yeah, of course. But I personally wouldn't advise people to take a huge pivot and say, right, we no longer work in all these sectors, all of our attention's going into defence because of this budget change. I know there is this increased spend, and it'll be very interesting to see what comes out of it from an SME perspective. But we ultimately need the right stakeholders in place that are going to make sure the SMEs, for example, are best represented, and almost hold whoever's spending the budgets accountable in terms of where that money's going and what it's going towards and how it's actually going to support UK industry as a whole rather than a select few, should we say. And yeah, so that it's obviously a good thing, and it's got people talking more about manufacturing and the opportunities there. But I think it's one to be taken with caution at this point in time.
Definitely. I think that a lot of the primes are going to see a massive opportunity because if you're a prime manufacturer, you're already involved in regulated space like aeronautics, for example. But there's also a responsibility for the primes. Like we're trying to push the idea that maybe they should be looking at strengthening the supply chain. And it's something as simple as looking down into your supply chain and saying, what systems are these guys using? How can we better communicate with them? They're not all going to move onto the same system or not all going to be using the same methods, but just simply going downstream and sending some of your resources or someone who can educate your second or third level person in your supply chain can make a massive difference to these primes. And maybe that's something that they should be required to do, is allocate a certain amount of spending towards improving the entire supply chain of manufacturing in the UK so the SMEs see a bit of that trickle down.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you see it in lots of sporting pyramids, for example, that the top level leagues are giving X amount of their budget to like the grassroots and the development side of things. I don't know why that can't be applied to a business case. So why can't there be a budget if it's whatever it is, 2.5% increase in defence? Why can't 0.5% of that be 100% allocated to SMEs and no one else? I think that's the level of breakdown that we would all as SMEs like to see. So it isn't just a yes, there's a more spend, but ultimately that spend is just going to go into the primes and no further. And I think that's the main pain point, I would say, and the industrial strategy, which has been released, same sort of thing. It's all very ambitious and there's some interesting points in there, but are the right stakeholders in place to make sure the SMEs are best represented? I don't know the answer to that yet, but we'll have to wait and see. But ultimately, yeah, I think there just needs to be a little bit more push from the top to actually get these processes in place and actually support the entire ecosystem.
Definitely. I also think it's one of those things where with this focus on onshoring, if they just did something like what you mentioned, 0.5% is focused on SMEs, you could almost have a situation where they could be replacing foreign objects that they're buying with a local manufacturer and kind of strengthening that part of their supply chain. Because we saw this whole thing, yeah, with the Suez Canal, you have one little amiss in a foreign territory and suddenly your entire supply chain is affected. But by onshoring, you protect yourself and you strengthen the local economy. So it's kind of like a win-win if you can force it.
Yep, completely agree. Yeah, you never know what's around the corner from a supply chain disruption point of view. And while it's great having access to cheaper products and cheaper services, if there is this mass disruption, then where do you turn? If you're not prepared for that, then what's the point in this increased defence spending if it ends up just getting caught up in logistics and caught up in the wrong systems anyway?
No, I completely agree. It does need to be well managed, and it needs to be systems in place that don't require extra administrative burden on the actual government organization initiating these grants. Because that's what happens is they end up becoming just burden nightmares, and then getting the grant itself or dictating how the spend happens just gets slowed down to a point where it actually doesn't really even make much of a difference. So yeah, it needs to be smart and kind of capital driven, which I definitely agree with.
Mm. Yeah, and that's partly where we're looking to position elements of ConeX. It's to be that almost that conversational bridge between what's gone before and what the rest of the supply chain and the rest of the ecosystem need. Lots of companies have said they want to work with more SMEs, they want that engagement, they want to help the reshoring initiative, they want to do all this good stuff, but there's almost no clear path or bridge or whatever you want to call it that's actually allowing them to do it easily. So a lot of them just don't bother. Why would you change the entire way your business works if there's no easy path to follow to do it? So that's almost how we're trying to position ConeX at the minute, is that bridge between top and bottom and in reverse.
Well, I think if you build up a big enough base of the SMEs, it makes it way easier, for example, a Prime or one of the governmental organizations to approach you and say, we want to understand the SME market. Here's a large portion of them, and we're getting a single lane of communication into them. And I think that's what a lot of people misunderstand, is that by coming together as a community, you actually have a better representation. You have a better opportunity to make a difference, because trying to get hold of all these individuals when they are spread out is nearly impossible. And it's why these systems don't work well. But the second you have them in a community, what you've done, it allows someone like a Prime to come down and say, okay, if we were to strengthen the supply chain, what would you suggest? And who better to source that info from than the actual end user or the end part of the supply chain?
Yep, that's basically what we're doing. So.
Yeah. And then your final year project at the University of Leeds was around designing and manufacturing miniature exploration robots using 3D printing, which is very cool. Would you say even before that you were really interested in the space, or was it through university that you suddenly realized there is something here?
I was always very maths and sciencey based at school, and the whole way through that, it was whether I knew it or not, that was always the route. I was always going to end up going into engineering, just because that's how my brain works. I didn't know it for a very long time. I didn't want to go to uni initially. I was in a college system that was very much positioning everyone to go to uni. There was no talk of apprentices, there was nothing like that. It was just, you get your A-levels, you go to uni, just that's how it's done. I was never 100% sure. I didn't know if uni was right for me. I didn't really know what I wanted to study. I didn't know where I wanted to go. So I did take a year out, think about it a little bit more, did end up going. And then from there, that's where it really started developing and learning more about the systems and opportunities. And the 3D printing and additive has always been something that's caught my eye ever since I first saw a printer and thought of what could happen and what could be made with those printers. And yeah, that project was just a really nice insight into a real world application. Because obviously prior to that, it was very much learn, exam, learn a bit more, have some more exams. But there was not too much real world application until that project. And it was like, okay, this is an actual problem that's out there now. What can we do to solve it? And yeah, that's probably the tipping point almost.
And do you do any of that 3D printing in your own time, or have you lost the itch to do your own manufacturing at home?
If I had time, I would. Um, I did while I was employed. I had a 3D printer and I would always like mess around with things and design things. And then my first business was a bit more design orientated and prototyping anyway. So yeah, so there was always that element. But now with ConeX, it's more focused on that procurement and that consultancy and helping businesses get value out of ConeX and out of the wider network. So it has sadly taken a bit of a backseat, but I've still got my eye on what's going on, and a lot of obviously our members are in that additive space, so I still see it on a regular basis. So yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to have a hobby when you're doing the whole startup thing because it seems like you're either awake and working on what you need to be working on, or you're trying to sleep.
Yep, pretty much. Sleep or work is yeah, very much life at the minute.
Sam, it's been great to have you on and really interesting to kind of hear about the journey you guys have had and where you're kind of going in the future. And I look forward to hearing more about the pivot that you guys are looking to do in the future. And yeah, I mean, I think that anyone out there who's an SME in the UK would obviously greatly benefit from joining ConeX and seeing what the community does, getting an opportunity to learn more, and just being conversations that are happening around UK manufacturing as a whole.
I agree. Yeah, obviously, thank you very much for having me, and more than happy to talk to anyone who's in this SME space or wider industry in general and see how we can assist and help.
Yeah, for any of our posts on this, there will be links down below to both Sam's profile, to ConeX, and all the other necessary resources. So go check it out. Join. I know that Sam hops on a call with you before you join ConeX and kind of explains everything. So it's super informative. It's a safer space for manufacturing because you know exactly what you're getting into and what the end result is. So yeah, go and check that out. And definitely looking forward to kind of linking up with you maybe a couple of months and we can do this again and see what's happened.
There's a lot of content that we're going to be putting out over the next few months, again, as that voice of SMEs and that representative kind of community, if you like. So we're going to be doing a bit of a content push. So it'll be good to catch up and show you some of the stuff that we've been working on as well.
Definitely keen to see that. Well, yeah, thanks again, Sam. And for everyone else, thank you very much for kind of tuning in and we look forward to the next one.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.